3 weeks to complete. In this video I'm going to share all the different tricks and techniques I learned while making this project. So to get started, the first step of every project is always to gather reference, because our imagination is a very cartoony image of reality. So if we base our renders on that imaginary image, the end result will not come out looking realistic or in the style we were going for. With the reference gathered, the next step is to make the ocean. And because I want the final animation to loop, I made the ocean loop by adding two separate ocean modifiers. The first set to generate and the second to displace. Then animating the time so that the first ocean is going to start at the value at which the second one is going to end. Now we have this doubling up effect, so to fix that I animated the scale value of the first ocean to start normal and end flat, and with the second ocean the inverse of that. So now that the ocean is animated, I moved on to the ocean material, which I made using a glass shader mixed with a diffuse shader using the foam layer that I had to check on earlier as the surface, and a volume absorption shader with a bluish color and a density of 2 for the volume. Once that ocean chunk was done, I duplicated it throughout the scene so it would cover the entire image, lowering the resolution the further away from the camera the ocean got. The next step is the volume and lighting. For that I added a giant cube and scaled it up so it would cover everything in the scene, assigning a emission shader with a bluish color and a lowered strength to the volume. So now if I lower the exposure, we can see that overcast look that we can also see in the main reference. The environment is looking good already, but the boat that I want to add is still missing, so I will make that next. Starting by modeling the boat hull, just blocking out the basic shape and then beveling the edges that should be round. Adding in a captain cabinet, then moving on to some boxes with screws, fisher nets and so on. For texturing I just used textures from Ambient CG, Polyhaven or 3dassets.1. Then to grunge everything up, I mixed a little bit of moss into the main materials, using a noise texture for the fisher nets and an ambient occlusion node for everything else. Now bringing in the boat into the scene, I had to make it move with the ocean. So to do that I added in a plane, subdivided it a bunch, assigned all the vertices to a vertex group and added a shrink wrap modifier, selecting a low-res copy of the ocean. Because if we use the normal high-res ocean, the boat will just go crazy on the surface. After that I parented all the boat's objects to an empty which I will call subcontrol, and then parented that empty to another empty which I will call boat control. And adding a copy location and a copy rotation constraint to the boat control empty. Then selecting the plane that is shrink wrapped to the ocean and the vertex group that has all the plane's vertices in it, for both of the constraints. If we look at a render of the current state of the scene, we can see that it looks pretty good already, but the things that are missing for me before I can call this render done are: first, movement of the objects on the boat, and second, the boat interacting with the ocean. For the movement of the objects on the boat, I wanted to show that this environment is very windy. So I made the fisher nets and bags on top of the boat ripple using a displacement modifier, using a cloud texture controlled by a rotating empty that finishes its rotation at the end of the animation. The barrels I made rigid body objects and simulated them, but because they are a simulation now, they don't loop anymore. So to fix that, I baked the rigid body simulation to keyframes and searched a frame where all the barrels were off screen. Then deleting all the keyframes up to that point. Then duplicating the last keyframe to the front of the animation. Now the barrels are in the same place at the very start of the animation and the very end of the animation. But until that point where they are off screen, they don't move. So to fix that, I added another rigid body simulation on top of the baked simulation and baked it up to that point where all of the barrels are off screen. So now the barrels move in a realistic way and snap to their original location once they are off screen. Then to make the boat interact with the ocean, I made the boat hull a dynamic paint brush and the ocean a dynamic paint canvas with a wave and a paint effect. The wave effect is there to make the boat cause waves on the ocean, and the paint effect is there to reveal foam on the surface. To make the paint effect look more like foam, I enabled the spread and dissolve options and changed the bake type to image sequence, because the vertex color mode does not support fading. Now that the paint effect looks like foam on the surface, we can use it to mix between the normal ocean shader and a foam shader that I made using a texture I got off Pixabay, plugging that image texture into the base color and the subsurface color of a principal BSDF shader with a low roughness and a little bit of subsurface scattering. Then to kick it up another notch, I used the foam texture multiplied with the foam mask for a little bit of displacement. So now it looks like the foam is actually resting on the surface of the ocean. The last things I have to do now are compositing and color correction. For the compositing, I just added a little bit of film grain, a vignette, and added more fog using the mist pass that I made sure to render out. For the color grading, I switched to Resolve. A quick guide to color grading here is lift are the shadows, gain are the highlights, and temp is the white balance. So you'll want the red, green and blue channels to be at about the same place on this parade here. By the way, if you don't see the colors like this, you can click on this drop down right here and select parade. Then you'll want to change the lift until the colors are about here and the gain until the colors are about here. Of course, these aren't rules, so you can change them up if you go for a different mood like I did here. My scene has a lot more blue colors and I wanted to stay that way, so that's why I don't adjust the white balance a lot. And one last thing, for the subtle camera shake I used Ian Hubert's Shakeify add-on with the wedding preset. But with that out of the way, here's the video once again. Have a good day. Bye.